Well, good morning, everybody. Today we are reading in the book of Psalms. We'll do that through the rest of this week and then all of the following week. This morning we are in Psalm 72. I hope you've already read this psalm. When I read it, I realized that I had never underlined a verse or a word in this psalm. And the reason I say that is when you look at my Bible, almost every chapter has stuff highlighted and underlined. But in Psalm 72, for some reason, I had never underlined or highlighted anything until this time. When I read it, if you did not look at the title and who it's ascribed to and all of that, you would read this psalm and say, well, here is someone who is offering a prayer for his king, for the king of Israel, praying that the king would be a righteous king and would rule and make judgments as the leader and judge the people in righteousness the way God would want, that this king would be blessed and successful. He would be respected and honored by other nations, by other kings and other queens, that he would really care about the plight of the poor and the oppressed and the weak and the vulnerable, because that's what he talks about in this psalm. Then when you look at the heading, you look at who it's ascribed to, it says a Psalm of Solomon. It got me thinking. Solomon's writing a prayer for himself and essentially saying, God, help me. I want to rule in righteousness. I want to care about the poor and the vulnerable. God, I want to be blessed and successful and be respected and honored by other nations. It's a good prayer. In fact, that matches what we know about Solomon's heart when he was a young king, when he was given the opportunity to ask for anything and he prayed for wisdom. And he wanted to rule God's people well, so he asked for wisdom. That's Solomon. That's who wrote this. Now, later Solomon changed and his heart turned away from God and he worshiped idols and other things, so he didn't end the way he started. But here, apparently, he's a young man, and he's praying. He wants to be a godly, good, effective ruler of the nation, of the people. A commendable attitude and a commendable prayer. Now, I want you to notice that the bulk of a lot of what he says here is about the way he leads his government, his administration, to care for the vulnerable. Starting at verse 1, he's praying, give the king your judgments, O God, and your righteousness to the king's son, to my heirs. May he, or he may be referring to himself there as David's son. May he judge, may I judge your people with righteousness, and you're afflicted. Okay, you're afflicted, you're humble, those who are of little means, small means. You're afflicted, you're humble with justice. In verse 4, may the king, may I vindicate the afflicted of the people, save the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor, those who take advantage of needy children and of those who are vulnerable. Down in verse 12, for he will deliver, God, this is what I want you to use me to do, to deliver the needy when he cries for help, the afflicted also, and him who has no helper. He will have compassion on the poor and needy, and the lives of the needy he will save. He will rescue their life from oppression and violence, and their blood will be precious in his sight. And so Solomon is praying, God, help me be a king who rules in righteousness, but I don't want to just be blessed and effective and successful. I don't want to just be honored and respected by other nations and their rulers, their leaders. God, I want to be one who sees that my administration, my government takes care of, helps the oppressed, the weak, the poor, the vulnerable, and to defend them against those who would take advantage of them. When you read the Psalms, when you read the Old Testament prophets, as we have been doing, when you read the Gospels and what Jesus said, God cares about that issue. God cares about those people. When it comes to us politically, making decisions about our leaders and who we will vote for, when it comes to the policies of our municipalities, of our state, of our federal government, these things matter as much as some of the other things we as social conservatives sometimes talk a lot about. And I think it's good for us to be reminded that God cares about these things as much as He does a lot of the issues that have captured our attention for the last 10, 20, 30 years. And we better be sure that when we're voting and when we're supporting policies, these things are considered, because God takes note. Now, one more thing, verse 20. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. And I read that and I thought, wait a minute. I thought Solomon wrote this. But if I read verse 20, well, is this the last psalm David wrote? No, what's going on is apparently Solomon had collected some of the prayers, the psalms of his father, King David, into a collection and wrote this one, Psalm 72, in honor of his father, and added this to the end of the collection. That's why he said, the prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. The collection's ended with this psalm that I wrote as a tribute to my dad. Now, in our book of Psalms, we likely do not have them in the exact order that Solomon collected them, because there are a few psalms after Psalm 72 that are authored, that are ascribed to David. But I love the idea, the image that Solomon collected the psalms, the prayers of his father, and then wrote one saying, I want to be a good king, a godly king who cares about the people, including the least of these. The Solomon of his young adult years, good example for all of us. The Solomon of his later years, when his heart turned from God by his many wives and the idols and all of that, a warning to all of us. How you start does not guarantee you'll finish the same way. And as a believer, as a disciple of Jesus, as you get older, you need to double down on staying in God's Word and keeping your heart and attitude humble before the Lord so that you finish well. Because if you become arrogant, I know it, I know the Bible, I've read it before, don't need to read it again. If you start developing that attitude, you run the risk of dying with a heart that is not very warm toward the Lord. And that would be a sad way to end up. Let you and me, let all of us be determined to always keep our hearts and attitudes like the Solomon who was a young man, so we never become like the Solomon when he was an old man. Hey, God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow as we look at Psalm 73.